I'm going to install a kid's slide on our deck here. I bought this slide at a swap meet a couple of months ago. So I'm going to take out a couple of these rails here, and I'm going to have the slide just slide out here into the yard. I think the kids will have some fun with it. And in addition to that, I'm going to add a new handrail on this side here, one that is nice and low for a little kid to climb up, so they can go up the steps here and come around and then go down the slide. So here I go. You're watching On the Mark with Mark. Here's what I'm working on this week. Looks like it's finished. It's a slide right off of the side of our deck, and a little kid's handrail down here so the kids can climb up the steps here heading to our deck. Starting a little bit here at the end. This is finished at this point, but we're going to go through the whole process I went through to get to this point. But what I wanted to say was that this is a project, the kind of thing that I've been working on most of my life. And it stems from a promise I made to myself when I couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old. And here's what the deal was. When I was a little kid, I noticed that everything was made for big people. Chairs, handrails, steps, tables, sinks, faucets, everything was made for big people. And here I was, I'd been a little kid my whole life, all of 3 or 4 years. And I was really ticked about this because I couldn't or wasn't allowed to use tools. But I said, I'm going to learn how to use tools, and I'm going to make stuff for little people when I get big. I'm not going to forget what it was like to be a little kid. And shortly after, at about 5, I entered kindergarten. And in the kindergarten room, lo and behold, here is little kid furniture. And I was just amazed. This is stuff a little kid can sit in. A chair that's made for my size. So I was thinking, well, apparently, okay, when you get into these institutions, then it's worthwhile. If there's enough of you in one place, you've got enough power, and then you get furniture your size. So I thought, does this mean I don't need to make little kid furniture when I grow up? And I decided, even at that point, remembering my promise from a year earlier, which could have been a quarter of my lifetime, I decided, no, this does not excuse it. I am still going to make things for little kids. And I have. And here is one of them. This is a handrail. I have a grandson, Daniel, and he's going to hang on to that handrail going up there, onto our deck here. And hopefully he uses the slide too, and can go down the slide and then come up the steps and go down the slide again. On summer days, we'll probably lift the end of this up and slide the swimming pool underneath of it so we can slide into the water. I think that could be pretty fun too. So as my kids were growing up, I made small furniture for them too. Now I'll look for some pictures that I took of my kids on the little bits of furniture that I made. And there was another thing that I did. I noticed my daughter, when we would go out the back door, she would be standing in front of the storm door, and it's just all up in her face, and she's trying to hang on, and then the door would come open, and then she's sort of hanging on to the edge of the door, and she's stepping out the door. And I thought, why couldn't a kid have something to hang on to here? So I went and I bought 2 simple drawer pulls. They're just that little bit of a U shape. And I screwed one of them onto the storm door a little bit low, and I screwed the other one onto the door jamb. And what she would do is she would be standing there, and I'd be watching, and she'd hang on to both of those handles, and then I'd open the door, being careful not to open the door too far because their wingspan isn't very big. But anyway, I'd open the door up, and then she had something to hang on to, and she'd step out and she'd let go of the higher one, and then the one on the door is a little bit lower, and now she's stepped down, and then she's stepping out of the house. So that was another thing I did. I did a very similar thing in our camper too. So hopefully I found those pictures. Let's get right to this project and see how this went.
Flashback.
I'm gonna need some kind of a bracket to hold this handrail up, so here's my choices. I'm gonna put in a handrail, but I don't want to put in this adult size handrail. So let's look down here. I see these dowel rods here. These are 6 feet long. That's too skinny. Okay, this is looking better. That's too skinny. Let's try, that's 1 1/8. Oh, these are only 4 feet long. But that looks like a good size for a little kid to hang on to. All right, let's get 2 of these. I'm gonna have to join these 2 dowel rods end to end. So I'm in this section here, and what I need is this screw on both ends. Yeah, let's do this 1/4 inch. I've tilted the table on my drill press down around 90 degrees and I plumbed it up with the level, including the fence. So I still need to make an adjustment to get the dowel right in the middle of my drill bit here. But before I can do that, actually I have to shorten my drill, or my rod, about 7 inches. So I'm going to cut this a little bit shorter, then we can drill that hole in the middle. Number 2. This would have been a good place to have a machine lathe. If I could have had a machine lathe that had a big enough throat that I could run this rod all the way through it, I could have drilled a hole exactly in the middle for sure. But I don't know, I think it's like it may be off a little bit. We'll see. I'm using Gorilla Glue on this because this is going to be outside, and I want to give it every fighting chance that it has. So I've wetted the end of my rod here, and I'm going to get some down in the hole as best I can. And here we go with my threaded insert, and here it goes. You can do it. Okay, coming together. Big squeeze out there. I'm going to stay over my grocery bag. Oh yeah! How does it look? I'm sighting down it. It is not too bad. I'm going to get a towel and wipe off the excess. That is not going to be too bad. I'm going to have to sand that a little bit. After painting, I think that's going to disappear. You know, I didn't look down these rods before I bought them to make sure to get some straight ones. This darker one's a little bit straighter than the other, but it'll be fine for a handrail. So we'll let that dry overnight.
The next day.
The glue up went really well on this part. I wish I'd have paid closer attention to the color of these 2 rods. I'm going to paint this so it doesn't really matter, but it looks kind of funny right now. But I've sanded this already, and it cleaned up really nice. It was just the very slightest of misalignments, you know, less than a 64th of an inch. So I'm very happy with that. So now it's joined together in this obvious spot. Now what I need in order to make this a handrail, it needs to have a flat edge on one side of a circle. Anyway, so I'm going to use a table saw here, and I've got my sacrificial fence attached to it, and my saw blade is partially in this fence, and then I've double-sided taped a spacer on there. So what I'm going to be able to do is cut across here, and it's going to take a section off, and then the flat spot is going to ride on this little wedge that I've put on here with double-sided tape, and then the feather board is going to keep it up against there. So that should keep it nice and straight, and then I can run this all the way through, and then we'll take a look and see what size we ended up with, and maybe I'll have to make a second pass, maybe not. We'll see how it goes. Looks like we need to raise the blade a little bit. That is a handrail. That just fits on there. I took the adult size handrail off of the stairway out there because it needed a repair right here. This joint had come apart and this joint, so I've re-glued those. But while I have it in here, this is a perfect template for my little kid's handrail. So what I did is I brought it over here and I set it on my dubby gauge, and I measured it out at a little less than 34 degrees. So I've set my miter saw at 17 degrees, and I made a test cut and I compared it with this angle right here, and it looks good. So that's what I'm going to use for my cut. Now I just need to make sure that I can keep this flat section. Oh, yeah, let's go this way. I can go like that, and then I'll make my 17-degree cut, and then I've got a short straight section, and then there's 245s and the return to the post. And I'll leave those returns kind of long until I get it out there and actually put it on, and then I'll take some measurements and cut it off after I have it all glued up. In fact, I was thinking I might drill a hole in the post and let this be let into the post a little ways for a little extra strength to it. Also, the adult size one, because that's a heavier rod, I only had 3 support points on it, but since this one is so much smaller, I know kids are lighter, but still it's a smaller thing, I'm going to have 4 support posts, not posts, whatever you call those things. These guys on it. So I'll make a cut. I'm using a similar setup that I used when I joined the 2 rods together end to end. Except this time, this shape here is actually an ellipse, so I've just moved over a little ways, but I've left the table right where it was, so my distance from the edge is still pretty good and centered. So I'm going to drill this hole in this end, but the other end is a problem. But let's get this one done first. So that worked out okay here. Unfortunately, this end is too long to fit under there and still be able to drill straight. So I'm gonna have to freehand this, which is not great. Let's see how this goes. I'll get it started first. Then I'm just going to use this square as a guide. Go this way. Good or bad, that's where it is. Oh, it looks pretty crooked. Going in pretty crooked. We'll see how much that rod can bend. See that? God, I can't believe it's off that far. Okay, here we go. Coming around. I need you to stop right there. How's that? Not perfect. This will still foam up. Okay, here's how this joint ended up looking. And you can see it's not a perfect alignment there, but this Gorilla Glue is gap filling. So now I'm gonna go after this with some 60 grit sandpaper, and I'll be able to just feather this in. Now take a look at it. You can see where I sanded up in part of the area where it was hanging over. But after that gets painted, that will look just fine. That's a beautiful joint right there. Right at the top of the steps. Everyone will see that. Well, all the little kids will see it. Here's my plan for how I'm gonna do these 90-degree corners here. Of course, I've cut these at 45 degrees. And luckily I have this template right here of exactly the size and length and everything that I need for the upper railing. So that's all I have matched. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clamp this thing down really good right here. And I'm gonna drill a hole through this way with a counter bore on it that I can put a plug in afterwards. And I'll sand that down. So it's gonna have one screw in it coming from one angle, and I'm going to use the Gorilla Glue, which I'm really sold on. So that's the plan here. This kind of clamp is really good for not slipping. There we go. Now that's just tight enough to draw it together without, otherwise it'll slide it like that. I'm gonna leave that alone. That's gonna set up nice. In order to be able to clamp this one down, I had to prop up my workbench on a 2x4 there so that it could lay flat. My 90-degree part could lay flat on there and still hang out this way. Now I just got to be careful not to kick that until it's dry. That looks pretty nice. All right. I'm gonna do a little finish sanding and then it's time for paint.
Meanwhile,
Well, here's the slide as I bought it. It's filthy dirty. And it's got some carriage bolts here that are pretty well rusted. So I'm just going to use the bolt cutters on them and cut those carriage bolts off. I have been looking forward to this project ever since I bought this slide at a swap meet for 10 bucks. And where I was thinking I'd put it, something like that. I don't want to be too close to the bush, but I don't want to be way out here on the end like this either. These two banisters, and then we'll come up with a way of mounting this thing right here. I'm gonna have to rip that off of there. The old pipe wrench might work on this. There we go. I bought this concrete pad right here to put at the base of this slide. Something like that. So I want this area right here to be nice and level. So I got to raise that up a ways and figure out what kind of angle this needs to be at. Attach this board here between these two banisters. I'm going to put this here. And I could have it to the outside like that, but I was thinking I might kind of slide it to the inside, give a kid a little more of a seat here. Kid's gonna have to either hang on to the handrail up here and put his feet up and then slide through. I also I have an aluminum tube that I was thinking about putting across here, which would feel real good on a kid's hands, a lot easier than that wood there. So what I was thinking of doing is I think I've got a 4x4 laying around here, and I thought I might cut this angle into the 4x4 and then just let it be horizontal here and then straight up here and then have that angle in it. So where it attaches will be a little bit narrower. I'm going to use this little tool here just to match the angle. So I'm going to put it right under here and tighten this down. There, now I've got this angle captured. And here's my 4x4. And this measures 18.5 inches wide. So I got a couple cuts to make. 18.5. Before I cut this angle in this board, this thing is kind of nasty looking. So I'm just gonna run it through the joiner here and just clean up the edges and kind of make it a little more new again. Good enough. Much better than it was. Didn't get quite all the way through. I've got my 4x4 mounted on here, screwed it in from this side, and the slide is ready to be mounted on here, but it's getting dark out here now, so I'm gonna call it a night. But otherwise, I think it's looking pretty good. Another day, of course. I'll make sure that it's straight. Straight enough. The slide is on. Boy, it really needs to be cleaned. Let's wash it up. That was fast. You can't even see where that plug is that hides that screw there. The old one's a little stressed. Now after 2 coats of paint, I'm ready to put these on. This one's going on for the first time, of course, and then this one's getting put back on again. So I'm kind of stuck here a little bit. There we go. And then I'll get my screw out of the bottom. Let's see here. Now, I may hit these with a 3rd coat of paint once I get them installed. Now, that might look a little strange that this is so much longer than this one, because these will end up being pretty close to the same length. But this was just the length of my cutoff. And so what I'm planning on doing is, when I get them out there on the steps, I'll measure how much I need to cut off, and then I'll cut off just that amount. And if I can, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bore a hole in the post, the diameter of this rod here, and I'm going to lay them into the post, I don't know, maybe a 1/2 or 3/4 of an inch. I think that'll give it a little more strength in kind of this sort of a direction there. I don't know how hard a kid is actually going to pull on these things, you know, because, I mean, a kid isn't really very heavy, but this is also a fairly light rod. I mean, look at the difference between an actual handrail and my little kid's handrail. All right, let's get them out there and get them put on. Now I've taken a measurement of how long these really need to be, so I'm going to cut them to that length. All right, I've got this handrail located now. So I'm going to drill a hole right there. see how that looks. The idea is that we'll go in there. Oh, it's a tight fit. Well, that's not gonna do it. Well, I crammed it in there with a clamp and it actually peeled off some of the paint on it. So that is a very, very tight fit there. In fact, I don't even really need this bracket right here. If I could get a screw in that from the back, that would be enough to hold that. That's pretty neat. Okay, let's make the hole at the bottom too. Right there. Pretty sturdy. I got a little sweeping to do around here to catch the sawdust from where I drilled the holes for the rod to go into my bottom and my top post there. This is a strong handrail. Maybe stronger than this one, just because I put these extra two posts or supports in here. But anyway, a little kid is going to be able to get a good grip on that. So I'm very pleased with this project. This was kind of fueled by that slide over there on that side, and that all turned out real nice. I'm very happy with how this went. If I haven't already asked you, please like and subscribe. Thank you.